everybody that's watching and joining us from home. I want to introduce one of our clients and naturopathic physician, Dr. Dan Wool. So Dr. Wool specializes in gut health and hormones, right?
Yep.
Something else?
Absolutely.
Okay, those are the two big ones. So today we're really excited to have him share with us about healthy hormones, what things we can do to make sure that our hormones are balanced or typical symptoms, and then lots of other good stuff. So thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you, everybody who's watching and everybody who showed up here today. I am Dr. Dan Wool. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I always feel like people need an explanation of what that is and how that's a little bit different. I got my doctorate here in the Valley at Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine, also an MBA from ASU. I've lived in the Valley for about 18 years now. Naturopathic doctors are a little bit different. We get the traditional medical training, and then we philosophically are a little different because we try to get to the root cause of things. And a lot of times traditional docs will chase symptoms around, whereas we're trying to really find the underlying problem and help you solve it. And so hormones are one of those things that really fall through the cracks. A lot of docs don't know what to do with hormones. They might send you to a specialist, an endocrinologist for hormones, and then they test some things but not all the things. They treat some symptoms but not all the symptoms, and it's a hard thing to get to the root cause of. So we'll get into that today. And so really what I want to get into is, what is a hormone? We hear hormone health all the time. What is that actually? I'm going to introduce you to some patients of mine. Names have been changed to protect the innocent, but it's a pretty typical mashup of the types of things that I see in the clinic, and I think you'll all recognize some of these people in your own lives, hopefully. And then we'll talk a little bit about solutions, and then we'll open it up to questions. I want to thank everybody who posted questions on Facebook. Hopefully I'll get to a lot of those as we get into the different cases and things going on. Number one, what is a hormone? All a hormone is a chemical signal. Typically it's going from the brain to somewhere in your body, a gland, an organ, to tell it to do something. It's kind of a nudge. And the number one thing, hormones do so many things to keep us human, but the number one thing it does is promote something called homeostasis. And all that means is your steady state. It's your natural level of energy. And that's in a very, very tight window. So if one drop goes out, the body sends a signal to put a drop back in. And it's usually in those drips and drops. But when we get really dysfunctional, those drops become glasses of water, become buckets, become dump trucks full of things leaving, and then the body's trying to put things back in, and you end up in this seesaw pattern, and it's a really hard thing to diagnose, and it's a really hard thing to recover from if you're not looking at the right thing. So that's the sorts of things that hormones exert on us. Usually that big seesaw pattern, it comes from stress. So we'll talk a little bit about stress. So I want to also introduce you to a few different types of people. Number one is Bobby. Bobby's 42 years old. We all know this guy. He's the life of the party. He loves to golf with his buddies. He loves to work out. He loves to drink beers and watch sports. And as he's aged, he's starting to realize he's not able to really have the kind of energy that he used to have. And what Bobby is suffering from most is in the morning, he needs coffee. Do we all know these people at work? I need to have my coffee. That's Bobby. Around 3 in the afternoon, he needs sugar. Like, he finds himself going to the convenience store, getting candy, getting sodas at late afternoon. Bobby also feels like he needs alcohol to sleep. Red wine at night, half a bottle, really helps to get him down to sleep. But Bobby has real difficulty with sleep. He wakes up every night at 3 a.m. He's up for an hour, and then he goes back down somewhere around 4:30, but he's got to get up at 6 to work out and go to work and do all the things. And so Bobby is what we call wired and tired, and he's crashing and burning. Now I want to introduce you to Tanya. Tanya is a baller mom. She is 38. She is a lawyer, and she is also exhausted. She's got 2 elementary school age kids at home. She really is the type of person who's doing it all and is amazing at doing it all and getting through her day no matter what. So she's the person who's up early, getting the kids out to school. She's doing work calls at that hour, and then after everybody goes to bed, she's returning emails for work. Tanya's having a number. We all know somebody like this. This is not you, Laurel, I swear. But yeah, this person's a lawyer. Come on. So Tanya's having a number of problems. Number one, she's exhausted. When I asked her about her energy's at like 2 of 10. And this is a person who works out really religiously. This is a person who has really good nutrition. Energy 2 of 10. What's up with that? Really fatigued. Second, she can't seem to lose weight. Again, she comes to the gym, she has good nutrition, but she's gained 15 pounds. At first she thought it was just the holidays and all the sugar, but it hasn't gone anywhere. And the weight is in some specific places. It's all over the place. It's in her hips, it's in her thighs, it's in her butt, it's around the middle, and she, for the first time in her life, is getting a double chin. And she doesn't like that. Face is getting round. She is a nut for skincare, and the skin is getting really dry. She doesn't like that either, and the thing that really alarmed her and brought her into her office is that every morning after she washes her hair, she's finding clumps of it that is falling out, and it's at the drains in her sinks and in her shower. So that's Tanya. And then I want to introduce you to a couple. They were high school sweethearts, Sherry and Mark. They're 48 years old. Kids just left the house. They own a small business here in town. Sherry is really not sleeping very well. She's got insomnia too, but the cause of her insomnia, she's starting to get what are called hot flashes. And these are keeping her awake at night, keeping her from going to sleep, and they're keeping her up. The other thing is, despite her good habits, she's starting to get feeling really bloated. She just hates that feeling. She hates the way it makes her look, and her clothes are not really fitting her very well. And it's really starting to concern her because, again, her nutrition, her diet, everything else is pretty much on point. Mark, her husband, he is really, when he goes to the gym, he gets really tired as he's going. He feels like he's losing power. And then he comes home and he's really tired from the gym. Instead of being energized like he used to be, he's exhausted. And Sherry noticed that Mark will be watching TV and he'll just nod out on the couch. He's starting to get lethargic, maybe a little depressed, and he feels like his muscle mass is going away. In fact, instead, he feels like his muscles are kind of becoming like a stick figure, and he's got like a belly, kind of like a shield sort of belly. We call it a dad bod. And so he's not real happy about that. And then both of them have a pretty regular sex life, but over the last year, they both seem to have lost interest in sex. It really doesn't matter to them. They can go a month and not even realize that they haven't done it. And so they both came to see me as well. So these are the different types of people. Each one of them represents a different type of hormone, and we'll get into what that is. Can everybody relate to one or maybe multiple amounts of these people? We all have someone like this in our life. So what can be done to fix these things? So I'll start up top with Bobby. Bobby's hormone problem is cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. Cortisol helps to wake us up, and when it gets too much stress, it starts to deplete. We start to empty that bucket. And when the body goes to look for cortisol, there's none there to help lift it up through these stressful times. The other thing with cortisol that we notice with Bobby is that it's cumulative, right? It ends up becoming long-term stress. So he doesn't have any energy in the tank, and at the same time, he's trying to, continually going to the well, and it's not there. That's why he is exhausted in the morning. The other thing that cortisol does, it helps regulate our insulin control. So when in the afternoon, he's stressed throughout the day, and then it drops glucose out of the liver, it increases insulin, and then he gets a crash. And when we have a crash of insulin or of sugar to the brain, which is our fuel, the body will drive us to the store and get us some chips or M&Ms or whatever it is to fix the problem. So that's his 3 p.m. And then Alcohol and coffee are not helping the problem either. Alcohol and coffee are awesome. However, and I'm not the enemy of fun as a doctor, trust me. However, if you have low adrenal function, low cortisol, and you're adding coffee, you're stimulating your adrenaline, you're making that go lower and lower and lower. So coffee has diminishing returns for somebody like Bobby. The other thing, alcohol at night is doing the same thing. It's a direct insult to the liver, it's messing with metabolism, and instead of repairing hormones overnight or calming it with sleep, it's waking him up. That's a cortisol response. That's a stress response to what he ate and what he drank. It's waking him up, and then we have to wait an hour for all that cortisol to leave the body, and then we go back into a deep melatonin sleep, and then we gotta wake up at 6 a.m. and we're exhausted. So this is all diminishing returns, and that's Bobby. So what can be done? How do we fix Bobby? Number one, you have to test. It's a really easy thing to test. We do a saliva test. You spit in a cup 4 times a day. We send that to the lab, and we can see where your rhythms are. Cortisol should wake us up in the morning and be high around noon, and then just gently slope down into the evening. Bobby was totally deranged. He's not a crazy guy, but his cortisol was really out of whack. Number one, super low in the morning. It needs to be higher in the morning. It was high in the middle of the night. It needs to be super low. So we were able to make some adjustments. How did we do that? One, lifestyle change. Unfortunately for Bobby, for a little while, we put him back on it later, but alcohol, coffee, these things we got out of his life just for a little bit to let his cortisol remanage. The other thing that we use a lot are called adaptogenic herbs, and these are exactly as they sound. They kind of go into the body and they help the body adapt to different stressors, and they have a particular affinity for the adrenal, so it really helps to calm things down throughout the day. So Bobby's exercise and diet still on point. We're able to kind of calm these spikes and get him back on a normal rhythm. He was able to kind of lose the spare tire around the middle, feel calmer, have more energy throughout the day, and kind of go back to his lifestyle as the life of the party. So Tanya, what was her deal? Tanya's diagnosis is low thyroid function. When we get too stressed, that metabolism can drag on the thyroid, and the thyroid, by way of explanation, is this little butterfly-shaped gland. It's just right here in the neck, and it kind of regulates what's going on with your metabolism. It regulates what's going on with stress. Stress can really affect it, and it kind of regulates these signals that go from the brain to the rest of the axis that control your stress hormones, sex hormones, and water balance. So when the thyroid gets off, the rest of the body can start to get out of kilter. Same way as if you had a flat tire, the car is going to start to kind of wobble and rock. So in Tanya's case, it slowed her metabolism. It was keeping this fat on board. And then it really tanked her energy. So what are some of the things, and then it also can make the hair fall out. So what are some of the things that we were able to do? We test. Now, if you go to a regular doctor, they usually only test one component, and that's called thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a signal that goes from your brain to your thyroid to tell it to make this energy hormone and regulate that homeostasis. What ends up happening, you're looking at this to this, but nobody's looking actually at the thyroid itself. So we look at all the hormones in the thyroid, and then a common affliction is called Hashimoto's. It's an autoimmune condition with the thyroid that attacks the thyroid. It basically bombs the centers that produce that hormone. They're kind of out of commission forever, and then you start to get this low function. The body tries to maintain it. So people get hot, they get cold, they get wired, they get tired. And we have to test for the antibodies so that we can identify that that's a situation for somebody. And that goes really undiagnosed. It gets missed for a lot of things. So what did we do for Tanya? Well, when you have low thyroid function chronically, you can prescribe thyroid hormone to help to bring it back up to its normal level, to that homeostasis. That's the number one thing we did. The second is there's lots of minerals out there that can help with thyroid function. Selenium is the main one. 1 Brazil nut a day has enough selenium to help support the thyroid. You want about 200 micrograms. You can also get that as a supplement. And then the other thing that we helped Tanya with is setting boundaries. One of the causes dragging down her thyroid function was this chronic stress. And sometimes you have to say, particularly if you're somebody who's giving and giving and giving, you have to kind of put some limits on that to make sure that you can get through your day at a normal level of stress. She was able to do that. Things calmed down. She adopted a meditation practice as well, and her stress is at the best level, she says, it has. What happened with her? Her energy came back up. She's able to get through her day without any crashes. She stopped losing her hair. Her skin got better, and her shape started to round back into form. I probably shouldn't say round because her shape started she started to get thinner. She did lose the 15 pounds. Again, this is somebody with really good nutritional and exercise habits who just got stuck due to low thyroid hormone. So how about our couple, Sherry and Mark? What was going on with them? Well, they're entered middle age. Our hormones help us reproduce, and then when that stops being a thing, usually between age 35 and 60 for most people, we lose hormone as we age. It's a very natural part of aging, but it spins off these really powerful side effects that really interrupt our lives, and you layer stressful life on top of that, and then all of a sudden you have this dysfunction. So in Sherry's case, it's called perimenopause. This is the time before menopause, and the first thing to go during perimenopause is progesterone. Now, females and males have hormones in different levels. Progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone are the three biggies. In a woman with progesterone, that starts to go first. She complained about being bloated. Well, why would that happen if progesterone went low? Well, progesterone is what's called a diuretic. It gets rid of water. And so when that starts to go low, that water accumulates in the tissues. It may look like fat, but it's really kind of water accumulation. The body has a slower time to get rid of it, so it accumulates. On the flip side of that, estrogen holds on to water. So while the body's trying to figure out, okay, progesterone's low, it drives estradiol high. And so instead of holding on to water, instead of losing the water, when it starts to gain more water. So you have this double impact. So she's feeling really bloated. Hot flashes also come from low estrogen function. So we start to lose hormone. That estrogen goes low, and it sends up what's called a vasospasm, and they're very, very uncomfortable. And they tend to increase as a woman goes through menopause. And so that interferes with sleep, it interferes with life. I've had executives that I've worked with have to excuse themselves with meetings to go fan themselves in the bathroom. It's incredibly uncomfortable. They can last anywhere from, studies say, from 6 months in a woman to 10 years. So it's really important when these symptoms come up to get them looked at. Just to go to Mark really quick, Mark is suffering from low T. So normal for a guy in his 20s is in the 1,000, somewhere around 1,000. Normal for a guy around 35 to 40 is about 300. And then it starts to trickle off as we get into our 90s. The problem is stress puts a real damper on that. It can take 100 to 200 points off of that. So somebody comes in with low T, instead of being at 300, they're at 100. That sex drive, most of us think of testosterone as sex drive. It's really like motivation and mood. It really helps to just kind of lift everything up. So when that T goes low, that's why Mark was having lethargy. That's why Mark was nodding off on the couch. And that's why he has no testosterone to help him build his muscle, keep his shape. And that's also why he's getting so exhausted, because he just doesn't have that motivation and drive. For people at the gym, sometimes it's a chicken egg thing with testosterone and motivation. Everybody knows they need to come in and work out. Everybody knows they need to have their nutrition on point, have a good diet. But sometimes they just go, well, I know this, but I'm just not, I just couldn't come in this week. And then a week becomes 2 weeks, becomes a month, becomes several months. A lot of times it's simply the testosterone. So one of two things: you can come in and work out. Weight lifting can bring everything up. In a man, up to 100, 150 points, and in a woman, about 10 points, which is really great. Women have about 10 times less testosterone in them. And then all of a sudden you've got that oomph, that motivation.
What's normal for a woman at that age range in testosterone?
Great. For those online, the question is, what's normal age-related testosterone? Generally, it goes from about 15 to 185, depending on the woman and her metabolism and where she feels comfortable. So a lot of times women will come in very, very low, and that's owing to just the natural decline in hormone function that's happening throughout the body. So as they all decline, then that progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone all decline. And so that's where the low libido comes from. So what did we do? With Sherry and Mark, we tested. We test not only progesterone, estradiol, and testosterone, but there's lots of other sex hormones around that. Progesterone, for example, can make sex hormones or can make cortisol. So if somebody's particularly stressed, Bobby, for instance, he's just making cortisol all day long. We're not making the sex hormones. So now you have this age-related hormone decline, and you're not making it from stress, and that's why it drops. So we test other things. I won't get into these today. DHEA, pregnenolone. These are some other hormones that surround these that can exert some influence, and we can take a look at it. So we tested Sherry's numbers. What we did for Sherry, we can do an herbal remedy, a balance, something that can help with estrogen. Vitamin E for estrogen, helps to lift estrogen in perimenopause, so that can be important. And really, with hot flashes, we're going for minimal effective dose. A little estrogen can go a long way. Sometimes we can do it naturally, but other times we can prescribe. We want bioidentical hormones, and that's what we put Sherry on. Sherry, the hormones, believe it or not, can be made, hormones can be made in the lab synthetically, but they can also be made from things ranging from horse urine to yams. I know, the drug's called Premarin, and it means pregnant mare urine. That's how they get this form of progesterone. So it's not identical to what we have as humans. And when you explain that to people, they go, oh yeah, I want the identical stuff. But we try to go for a minimal effective dose. Progesterone's involved in sleep. It can really help improve sleep. Certainly getting rid of the hot flashes can improve sleep as well. So we tested, gave her a little bit of hormone. Great news, hot flashes went away, Sherry's sleeping. We put a little bit of testosterone into the cocktail. We can prescribe these in combination with a little bit of a cream. Put a little bit in there. She's more motivated at the gym, and her sex life with Mark is returned to normal. Now Mark is a man. We prescribed him testosterone. His T was below, and we can prescribe it in a cream. We can prescribe it as an injection, and we can prescribe it as a pellet. This is just an implantable pellet that goes into the glute that has a steady release of testosterone over 5 or 6 months. We gave Mark a pellet. His libido went back up. He was able to kind of shed the dad bod, and he had more motivation and energy when he was in the gym. And just a little bit of that extra was able to get him over the hump. Once the body gets back to steady state in that condition, it's a lot easier to manage stress. So his stress went down as well, and as I mentioned, the sex life returned to its normally regularly scheduled sex life. So those are our people: cortisol, thyroid, and then sex hormones: progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, and those are some of the ways that they can get stressed. So it kind of begs the question: where do we land? And what can be done in our lives to fix this ourselves? Well, you're all here, so you're already doing 2 of the most major things of self-care in order to keep your hormones healthy. Number 1, exercise. I mentioned that it helps, weight-bearing exercise helps to lift testosterone, which helps with motivation and drive. It also helps in that way, helps to balance all the other hormones, which is fantastic. Nutrition, it needs to be on point. When I talk about stress, I think we all think of stress as some major life event, an accident, a parent being sick, something happening to us major at work. Stress can be little things that accumulate as well. What you put on the end of your fork could either be something that helps you and helps your hormone balance, or it can be a subtle stressor that starts to accumulate. So we want to continue to make good choices with food. A nutrient-dense diet that is low inflammation is huge, and that's the kind of support that we get here at TriFit, which is fantastic. And then the exercise too. Weight-bearing exercise, not too much, making sure you're getting gentle movement and good rest in between. We mentioned Bobby. Bobby was not getting any rest in between his exercise, and so his cortisol accumulated. Workouts became stressful. But you dial that back a little bit and get the right kind of weight training, the right kind of workouts, the right kind of rest, everything starts to re-regulate and get back to that homeostasis. The other thing is sleep. You have to have good sleep hygiene. Now, something like a hot flash is really going to send that into a tizzy. Waking up at 3 a.m. like Bobby was, that is not healthy. But making sure that you're getting enough sleep every night, winding down, no phones in the bedroom, making sure that you're in a calm, low-lit, dark, cooler bedroom really helps to serve the body's natural function of sleep. We make and renew our hormones when we sleep. So when we don't get enough sleep, we're not renewing our hormones. And if we're starting to get depleted, it's going to take it even deeper, and we don't want that. And then stress is kind of a common theme that we're getting to today. You really have to get right with your stress. Again, we usually think that these are major events, but there's also long-term stress, little things that we do every day, and you have to have that conversation with yourself, and, particularly if the hormones are getting a little out of range, is how are you managing your stress? What types of things are coming at you, and how are you dealing with them? And so it's good to just kind of sit down and take stock, and then also do some things to manage stress, a prayer practice, meditation, making sure that there are boundaries set in your life so that you have enough room to manage calmly. The other thing I would recommend is sometimes we don't see everything, and it's important to seek professional help. It's great to have a quarterback in order to see the things that you're not, or to discover things that you might not be an expert to discover. So finding someone like a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine doctor really can help to uncover some of these hidden stressors and hidden hormone and these pieces of hormones that are derailing what are otherwise really good habits toward our goals. And I'll just end it on that. I will say that when you balance your hormones, it can really be life-changing. You can go from like 0 to 100 very quickly with some very easy things, as long as you take the time to think about it and to have a professional or others help you to uncover them. So now I can get into any questions that you might have about hormones.
I have a bunch, so I'll let you guys go. Anybody?
Go ahead.
So one thing that I was curious about is like those people that are operating on a high default of stress level.
Yeah.
So my mom suffered like major adrenal fatigue when my dad died.
Yes.
And she had no idea that she was even stressed. And I think I probably have a little bit of this too.
Mm-hmm.
You're just operating at such a high level all
Totally.
the time that you don't feel quote unquote stressed. Do you do any kind of just I know like a typical MD doesn't test for all the hormones. If somebody were to come in and say, I just want to know what all my levels are, like, and you can test for cortisol and thyroid and the sex hormones, you do all of it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Can you test for all the hormones at once? Absolutely. I parceled these into some very specific examples with the very specific, here's how we look at it. But generally, when somebody comes in, we will run a male wellness panel or a female wellness panel, depending on the person, that has all of those different things. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's an axis, right? It's not just a thyroid, or that's responding to stress down here in the adrenals. That's responding to sex hormones that are also made in the adrenals or in the organs. We also, it's all a feedback system too. So we test things to see, well, how well is that feedback system working? Are there signals that are broken? And then we can just look at each individual piece of that axis and say, okay, here are the things that we need to do. We need to calm the adrenals. We need to adjust the thyroid. We need to help to bring up some of the sex hormones. Or sometimes it's just simply, excuse me, sometimes it's just simply the diet and lifestyle interventions that we can start gentle and work our way up. But testing and doing it comprehensively is always the best way to do it, because it's never just one thing. We want to make sure we're looking at the big picture and everything around that one particular one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. In a non-naturopathic physician's world,
Yes.
My physician that I've been going to for 35 years or more, every time there's a problem, there's a new prescription.
Yes.
And it just keeps, there's another one, there's another one.
Right.
So it goes from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. And I'm sure that has to have some kind of effect on hormones.
Yeah.
And so if you do a panel and look at all the hormones, can you then adjust those other prescriptive drugs down or change them, or can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, polypharmacy, that's what that's called. It's very, very common. And it happens a lot with great intentions. You have a symptom and the doctor prescribes a pill to treat the symptom. Heart disease is a really great example of this. The blood pressure goes up, we prescribe something to help the blood pressure go down. The cardiac output changes, so the pulse goes up, we prescribe something to make the pulse go down. We start worrying about heart attacks, so we prescribe a statin. Let me just pause on statins really quick. So we make all our hormones and cells out of cholesterol and fats. So a statin blocks the production of cholesterol, which means you're going to block all the production of your hormones. So I see a lot of guys, particularly who've been on these sorts of drugs for a long time, and they have low hormone function. And it's not just the guys, but that's who I see. It seems to affect them the most prevalently. So you go from one to the other to the other. Blood sugar, same thing, and then all of a sudden you're chasing all these symptoms with all these drugs. And so we do tests. So in addition to the hormone tests and things like that, we're running a complete blood count, metabolic panels. We look at people's A1C. We try to get the big picture because the hormones do influence those markers. Now we talked about that steady state, that homeostasis. That's all that those drugs are trying to manage. But you start to get out of control with that. We want to manage homeostasis with just normal diet and lifestyle, interventions, the things we're talking about, keeping stress at bay, sleep. In that way, when that comes back, you can start to peel back some of those drugs. For instance, if somebody with a lot, like a high cholesterol, situation, but that person doesn't eat right or exercise, and they have very high stress, well, if you eat right and exercise and reduce their stress, can they bring that down? Absolutely. And so we want to try those interventions first, and then once those regulate, we can start to peel off the various drugs. A lot of times those chase symptoms. There are many common symptoms that spin off of hormone dysfunction or low hormones, depression, weight gain, anxiety, heart palpitations, things like that. When you go to a specialist, for example, they're going to look at it through the lens of that specialist. The palpitations might be addressed with some sort of heart drug instead of knowing that it's low thyroid function. Depression may be from, it would be the example of Mark, he's got low T. He's lethargic and depressed. That's low T, but they might give him an SSRI. His wife, Sherry, has these vasospasms. That an SSRI, which is a common antidepressant, that's the way you treat vasospasms. So she ends up on an antidepressant. And so now you have somebody with a low libido, low mood, and now it's just balance. She's antidepressed. She's not happy, she's not sad, and she's certainly not achieving her goals. It didn't get her any further down the way, except maybe it helped the hot flashes, maybe it helped her mood slightly. So these are all things that we look at for sure. We definitely test all the different markers. We take a really, really complete history. That's one of the things I'm very proud of. My initial visits are 90 minutes. We get into everything. And it's a very thorough process, and that way you can kind of connect dots and then just get down to what brass tacks and what's really going on, and then we partner up on ways to treat that. But yeah, that polypharmacy, that's super common, and it's super. There are a lot of easy ways to start to peel that back and make it more natural.
I got another one.
Sure.
So, I consider myself to be a big health advocate, obviously, and I read a book called In the Flow, and I remember walking away from that book just like feeling like a complete moron, because I've been on hormonal birth control probably since 17, and just except with the exception of when I had my daughter, obviously.
Sure.
And so I'm having that IUD removed in March,
Mhm.
so I haven't had a normal hormonal like
Mhm.
cycle in a long time.
Right.
So I was just curious, if you like, would you test in a case like mine? Would you test someone's hormones before they went off that, or would you wait until that IUD or whatever, or they're off birth control
Yeah.
to let things kind of do what they're going to do and then test?
Yeah, it's a
Because
great
it's-
question.
okay.
Um,
And
it-
what's your thought on birth control
yes.
as well?
Sure. So birth control, a couple things. Number one, it's meant to suppress the hormones. They keep them really low because young women, for example, may have really painful, debilitating periods. It's a really good way to help to to regulate things. It obviously has its contraceptive effects as well. But it can really help to regulate a lot of issues with a woman's cycle and her well-being, and it's been a lifesaver for lots of people. But it does suppress things. So when we talk about when to test, when you have a birth control on board, the thing you see in labs with oral contraceptives or progestin IUDs and things like that, all the labs are perfect because birth control is meant to regulate the cycle. So throughout the entire cycle, the hormones are absolutely perfect. So if I test somebody who's on birth control right now, the labs are going to come back perfect, and it looks like there's nothing wrong. And frankly, there is nothing wrong. They are, still going through everything. However, when you suppress something in the body, it's like pushing down a spring, and then you let that spring up, and so the body will find that homeostasis. And the way it does it kind of goes up, and then and then it finds its level. So I would say, as far as when to test with the removal of the IUD, I would definitely do it after, maybe 2 or 3 months later, to see how things are. Your periods, may re-regulate, your hormones will re-regulate, and it needs a few months to just try to get back.
So nobody should
Get
probably
back to
talk to
normal.
me at all. Like for the whole month of April, they're still talking.
Oh no. Yeah, it's there are things you can do. There are like herbal balance,
Well, and this book was
concoctions
all
and things
about
like
the
that.
foods that you eat, and
Yes.
the, like just even your exercise at different times,
Yep.
if you're all that. So anyway.
Oh yeah, for sure. And environmental toxins, things like that. These all affect our hormones. So but I would say wait for the body to try to get to that steady state. It does become a little bit more about symptom management at that point, and trying to find balance without really affecting the body's ability to get back to that steady state. And then once it does, test and say, okay, here's where your levels are at. Those may be perfectly healthy. They may, maybe need a little bit of help or balance. But we look at everything. We look at the big picture. We look at everything that's surrounding those hormones, and we say, okay, here's where to optimize.
Great. Anybody?
Yeah, so I am on hormonal therapy, and I have hypothyroidism, no Hashimoto's,
Okay.
and I've struggled to eat. Apparently, I don't eat enough protein.
Okay.
Apparently, I don't eat enough. Period. Right. But I'm struggling with with my like 10 pounds, but still it's annoying, and so I'm just curious about how I eat well. I eat really super well.
Cool.
And just talking about how protein, carbohydrates, and the combinations of, and in my case it's pretty specific, so you can feel free
Sure.
to get more generalized. But
Yeah.
I heard a lot of women saying that once they start looking at their proportions of macros.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that they don't eat enough protein. And I mean, frankly, like you can only have chicken and eggs and salmon so many times a day, in my opinion, and
Yeah.
whey protein. And
Yeah.
like to have all these things going on, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm still not anywhere near where I should be.
Yeah, and it's super common. And macros are really important. So macros, proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Everybody's a little bit different. It may be that you need a little more protein. It may be that you're the type of body type that needs more carbs. We try to get those from complex carbs, the starchy carbs, versus say running for M&Ms or something. But it may mean, dialing that in. The great thing to do, I would, track, use the MyFitnessPal and things like that.
Are you in the
Oh,
camera?
I don't know. Am I still in the camera range? Are you hearing this? Have you left?
TV, sorry.
Um,
I'm like, I'm pretty sure you.
Yeah, but that's when when your goals get stuck. That's when tracking starts to become really important, particularly with food. You could be eating all the right things, and it might not, and it's not necessarily. So you're on HRT, so you're getting supplemental hormone. Your thyroid is in balance. You're probably checking that on a regular basis with your doc. That's great. You might adjust the dose one way or the other at times, but like if those things are doing well, then you say, okay, well, I am eating nutritiously, but am I eating nutritiously for me? And that's when you really start to track and say, look, all right, here's a week or two of my meals, here's where all the percentages came in, and here's where my weight loss was or wasn't. And as you do this time over time, you can start to do some experiments, right? Say, I am getting enough protein for somebody of my body type and the types of goals I have. However, maybe I need to get more fats. Maybe I need to get more carbohydrates. And some bodies are just like that. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra one way or the other. Other things that I do a lot of digestive work. Sometimes there are subtle stressors in the form of like food sensitivities and things like that. So things that we eat every day may just be causing this subtle inflammation in the body and when that happens, the body likes to it's like, wait, what's going on? And it'll like get sympathetic and kind of like hold on to stuff. And the things that's gonna hold on the most are your fuel, right? Because it's like, oh gosh, if we run out of fuel in this state, that's not good, we're gonna die. Not that dramatic in day-to-day life, but that's what the brain is thinking, right? So it's gonna go find the glucose, it's gonna store it as fat because it thinks it needs it, because that's the best long-term steady state energy. And then all of a sudden it's like, why isn't this 10 pounds coming off? So try the diet and lifestyle interventions first. In the case, we mentioned Bobby, we mentioned Tanya, we mentioned these people who have kind of stressful lifestyles too. Get right with your stress. Calming the waters sometimes enables that confusion the body has, that holding on to weight. Go, oh, okay, and it can release it. So track. Track. I think that one of the great things about coming here is that your exercise is kind of tracked for you already. If you come in 3 days a week, you're gonna hit all the body parts. You're here for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. It's not too strenuous when you're doing it, but like it's not like it's hard to over-exercise and really get depleted.
One of the things we see is people are not resting though.
Yeah,
They
you have to rest
coming
in between.
and they're and the whole point is work really hard while you're here, and then when you're not here, you should be sleeping deeply.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
As much as I say it, it's like, well, I'm hitting my workouts. It's like, there's these other things.
Yeah, so rest in between is huge, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, obviously, try to get more sleep and things like that. But active rest. I mean, active rest is walking. It's going for a hike. It's it's doing something fun and subtle, but without getting too overly spun out or getting the adrenal system and the stress system overly involved. So it just, when you're stuck on things, you just kind of look at what's around you first, and then if those aren't still with the experiments and the adjustments, if those still aren't re-regulating, then it's probably time to go back to your doctor and say, all right, take a look at my thyroid levels. Thyroid, I'll just throw this out there as well. Thyroid's tricky, so it has the TSH, the signal going from the brain to the thyroid, it has a wide range. It's like 0.45 to 4.5, and where people are optimal is somewhere around 1. So that whole distance from maybe like 1 or 2 all the way out to 5, somebody could be out here, and a doctor will say, oh, your TSH is in range, you're normal, but they're hypothyroid, and so you got to make sure they're looking at your T4 and T3 and saying, okay, and that they're in range. That's the same thing. They could be at the bottom of the range, which means like they're depleted, or they could be at the top of the range, which means there's the feedback. So you want them kind of in the middle to the upper end of the range, and that's optimal. And you can start to kind of thin slice it and manage that. So make sure that they're looking at that in a robust way, because you might need a little slight adjustment to the thyroid hormone just to speed the metabolism along. Sometimes when we get healthy and re-regulate with hormones and stuff, that it's kind of like that, again, it's like the body relaxes and it can get to its steady state, and that steady state is above where you were, or it can be above where you were, and then it'll regulate other things, hold on to weight, lose weight. It just really depends. Hopefully that answered your question. So I'd say look at what's around you, manage stress, adjust nutrition as necessary, and take a more robust look at the thyroid if those fail.
Right. So how do people get a hold of you?
Yes, you can get a hold of me on the socials. It's at Dr. Dan Wool, and you could email me. It's Dr. Wool, DRWOOL, at chambersclinic.com. Chambers Clinic has 2 offices, one in Greyhawk, North Scottsdale, and one in Tempe at McClintock and Broadway. I'm here at the gym. When I'm not injured, like I am now, I'm here usually 2 or 3 times a week at least. So just find me.
And you work with people remotely as well, right?
I do. As long as they get established in person, or on Zoom, we can work together. A lot of times, for people out of town, we can order tests in their community and get all those results back and work with them.